Welcome to Realm Painters. In today's video, I'm going to show you the 3 basic ways to water down your paints. Starting off with the base watering of the paints, followed by glazing, and lastly, how to create a wash. But before we get into that, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to let us know what types of videos you want to see in the future. And also, leave a comment if you have any other recommendations or tutorials you would like to see. Now, starting off with the simplest of the 3, and the one you're going to be using the most often, watering down your paints. I don't know what else to call it. Now, you might be asking me, why would I need to water down my paints? Can I not just use the paint straight from the pot? And the answer to that is a little complicated. But before I show you the how, I need to explain to you the why. You see, the paint you get for mini painting tends to be on the thicker side, and since most of you are here from Warhammer, or at least use Citadel paints, I'd like to explain to you the main different paints that you will use. Starting off with base paints. Base paints are your base color paints. They often are the most generic of all of the colored palette, and they also tend to be very, very thick. Layer paints. Layer paints are very similar to base paints, except for they're not as thick, and they usually are used as a highlight or a layer on top of the base. Contrasts. Contrasts are a very, very thin paint, usually, that is used as a wash or shades of the layer paints and base paints as spoken of before. And lastly, technicals. These are some of my most favorite paints as they add a new feature to your paints, i.e. a glow effect or rust, or there's really all sorts of interesting and unique technical paints. They even have paints, technical paints that are used for basing. But I don't want to explain too much about the different types of paints because that I do plan on making a video breaking down the different paints and specifically Citadel paints between the bases and the layers and the contrasts and the shades and the washes and there's so many different types that I want to do a full breakdown video on that later. But back to the point. The reason you want to water down your paints is because it makes them a lot easier to control, and it makes them last a lot longer. For example, this is Rhinox hide. Without water, it is very thick, and it is very easy to use too much. But if you add a water, such as a 1-to-1 ratio of water to paint, you can see it goes on a lot smoother and lasts a lot longer. Now, it's important to remember that when you do this technique, you have to do a couple of layers to ensure nice coverage of the model and a good pigmentation of the paint, because when you water down paints, obviously you're going to lose some pigmentation. So it allows you to do those base paints with a lot more control over how much paint is going onto the model. Because you really don't want to end up with some real crusty models that you can end up with. I know the very first models that Sheridan and I painted were Adeptus Sororitas models that I got from a combat patrol, and they are rough. They are rough. It was a learning process to figure out how much water you need to add to the base paints. But I like using a good 1-to-1 paint to water ratio. Usually you can just do one paintbrush into the water and one paintbrush into the paint, and you can call it a day. However, it is really easy to overwater your paints, which is going to get us to the very next thing. Glazing is used when you want to get a gradient style of paint transition, or usually a good transition from one color to another in a subtle way. As you can see, glazing is a very watered down version of the paint. A good rule of thumb is a 3-to-1 water to paint ratio. However, it does depend on the type of paint you are using, as we discussed earlier, and it can vary. Layers, like I said, they tend to be a lot thinner, so you don't have to use as much water, but sometimes they're not. There is a fine line between a layer and a base paint when it comes to Citadel, and they tote that line pretty hard with some paints. Usually when you're doing a transition or glazing, you want to mix the two paints, the two base paints, to get that middle ground to create that gradient transition. Keep in mind, glazing is a more advanced technique. It requires a lot of control and is pretty easy to mess up. But once you get a hang of it, it opens a whole new avenue of painting and a whole new style of painting. You'll see a lot on, like, if you're new to miniature painting, you'll see a lot of people on like Instagram and stuff like that. They do that glazed type paint job. However, like I said earlier, it is really easy to mess up because you can add way too much water, which would in turn create our very next thing. Washes are usually the final step in the painting process, or one of the final steps in the painting process. And luckily, Citadel has a bunch of pre-made washes, shades, and contrast paints that all work kind of the same way, and are really good. I really like a lot of the Citadel paints. However, before I show you how to create a wash with using a base or layer paint, I have to address that there are some Citadel contrast paints and washes and shades that are very thick is not the right word. They're very pigmented, so they've got a lot of color and a lot of saturation that you do usually want to wash down or water down, or you'll get streaks and grime and it just won't look as good. So when it comes to contrast paints, a good rule of thumb is a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1 water to paint ratio. Now let's talk about how to create a wash using base paints and layer paints. This is the final skill I will be teaching you. And as it so happens, it is actually the easiest because unlike the earlier steps, it's really hard to add too much water. Now, of course, I mean that within reason. I'm looking at you, Frank. Yeah, you. I know what you were about to do. Take 1 drop of paint and add it to your cup of water and say that I was wrong. I'm not. You're just being weird. Now go sit in the corner with the gene stealers. The best rule of thumb when creating a wash with a base paint is a 5-to-1 water to paint ratio. Like I said, it's kind of an eyeball technique and requires mostly trial and error. Nonetheless, it is still a lot of fun once you get the hang of it. And just like that, you know the 3 basic ways of watering your paints and the 3 starting ways of painting in general. Simple in theory, a little bit more complicated when you get into the meat and potatoes. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I hope you liked and subscribed. If you haven't already, you should do so now. We are planning on releasing tutorials weekly, and we've got a lot more planned, as well as a couple of challenge videos are on the horizon as well, if you're interested in that. But I think that's about all that I have for you, so I'll catch you guys in the next row. See ya.